They were both well educated, and education was a part of who they were. Learning was a part of who they were. And it came out in lots of ways, but it came out to us as children without us really realizing that it was happening.
When I was small, he wrote my 2.5-minute talks. And so I always raised my hand to give them because it was so easy. And when I was about 8, I wrote a talk on baptism, and I wrote it. He decided I was old enough that I should do it myself. And I labored and cried, and it was hard, and didn't volunteer so much after that. But I did go to Dad to talk out ideas and things, because he would do that with us. Then I would go to Mother for her input and to practice it.
I remember my dad teaching me how, on my first talk, he helped me. He didn't write it for me. He helped me think it through, and he taught me how to organize my thoughts and how to articulate them. And it was something that I learned at a very early age.
When the 5 of us were young, he went back to school and studied to earn a doctor's degree, in addition to working full-time to support us. And I remember the living room table being covered with his books and papers. As a youngster, I was fascinated with him learning another language, Spanish. And after all these years, I remember his Spanish book and some of the lines that were in that book.
I forget how old I was when my dad got his PhD. I don't remember him being gone on nights and weekends. I was probably too young. But he got it after I think he got it wasn't a PhD, it was a Doctor of Education. But he got it after he had 5 children, which is a pretty remarkable accomplishment.
And she would type his dissertation, 1 page on 4 carbon copies. So if you made a mistake, you would erase each carbon. And she did it on this little hand, not automatic typewriter. And Dad wrote his dissertation about extracurricular activities in high schools. And years later, I started reading it. It was fascinating to me to see how many of those kids still do. So many of them they don't do anymore because so much has changed.
Education was really important to them. We were never told to go to college. It was just understood that that was important, or that was, important for success in life.
That's all part of the question about education. It was just who we were. It was part of what was expected of us. I learned at an early age that my parents had gone to college. I looked at their college yearbooks. I heard great stories about going to Dixie College and about going to BYU.
And of course, having seen their experience in school and going through their yearbooks was really a help. I used to go through their BYU yearbooks, and we listened to BYU games on the radio at night, so that was fun. And I saw how well they did in school, so that was just something I always wanted to do. So part of my motivation was to get a scholarship so I could go to BYU. We had Weber College in our town, but I wanted to go to BYU, and that took more money, so I wanted to get good grades so I could go to school there, carry on the tradition.
But I never ever questioned the fact that I would not go to college. I mean, it was just part of who I was, and that I probably would get an advanced degree beyond college. My mother's father had been a doctor, and while it was never talked about that my grandfather on my father's side, my grandparents had gotten college degrees. I knew that my dad had a master's degree and a doctor's of education degree, and I just never doubted but what I would not only go to college, but I would go to graduate school. And I never, so I'd say that they instilled that in me from the time I was young. That wasn't something that was necessarily typical among people living in Ogden. There were many who there were some who didn't go to college, there were some who didn't go beyond college. But it was just who they were, and part of what I came to expect from growing up in the home that I grew up in. They didn't hold their education over those who were less educated, but it really was a part of who they were, and it meant a lot to them.
Oh, education was very important, and the teacher was right, and we were expected to do what we were asked to do, and they did anything they could to support us. They never did our work, but they would, listen to us and encourage us.
So from the time we were very little, we were taught to love books, probably because they read us stories.
So we were encouraged a lot in school, encouraged to try things. Dad wanted us to take debate. He encouraged us to try out for speeches. I Speak for Democracy contest and won that 2 years, and he would encourage us to do things like that.
Earlier, my parents always used good grammar. They taught us not to use slang or to swear, and to be sure that we were speaking grammatically. I mean, that we had subject-verb agreement, and that we used our tenses correctly and our syntax and things like that.
Mother really taught us good English. We didn't always use good English because being principal's daughters, we didn't want to be high and uppity. So we were rather colloquial, and particularly I remember doing that and wishing that I had not. Wishing that I'd been more particular in my speech. But Mother tried, and she would have us look up anything we didn't understand. And I just remembered now that I said something earlier that should have been "than we" instead of "than us." And it's been bothering me because I can't remember what the sentence was, and I realized it the minute that it came out.
Mother was intelligent and loved learning. She was involved in our education, helping us with school projects and requesting the best teachers.
And she had made sure we had the best English teachers. She quietly went to Mr. Grover, who had been Marsley's English teacher at a junior high, and said, "Dean, I want you to apply for this job at Ben Lomond." And so, I'm not sure if Marianne had Mr. Grover. I'm positive she must have. I did, Doug did, Helen Marr did. We all had Mr. Grover. It was because of Mother. And, we never had favors because we were the principal's children. And in fact, sometimes there were things we didn't get because of that. But very quietly, when I was in elementary school, I remember I was in Mrs. Peterson's 5th grade class, and the principal came in and took me out, and he put me in Mr. Kump's. And Mother had quietly gone to the office and asked if I would be switched, because Aunt Wanda had taught with Mr. Kump. He was a life-changing teacher. He was my 5th grade teacher, and that was because of Mom.
Of what I wanted to say about my mom getting involved in my education, from the time I was tiny, I always ended up having the best teachers. Every year I'd end up with the best teacher, and I never could figure out how my luck was so good that I ended up with the best teacher. It's because my mom would go in. She was personal friends with the principal, and she'd sit down with him and say, "Okay, I want my daughter to have this teacher next year," and he'd say, "Okay," and I always did. I didn't know that when it was happening.
There was one teacher, he never ever talked about anyone except in positive points. But there was one teacher that I could see as I got older that he was concerned if we were to have his class. And so he rather strongly urged me to take this other class at the time and missed that experience. But he still never said anything negative, or he was always very positive or reaffirming of his teachers. And when I was in high school, I had a teacher from Northwestern who taught Latin. And I had enjoyed Latin the year before with Miss Waddell in junior high school. Loved it. And this year it was just pure torture because he made it so difficult. And I studied 6 hours a night in high school on my Latin. And every night I would sit in the sink on the counter and kind of into the sink. Sometimes I got too far. While Mother was working, and she'd listen to me while I practiced or recited my Latin. They always welcomed open discussions, and we discussed politics and everything. We just gave our opinions, and everything was free to be laid out and talked about. I really liked that. They didn't really encourage it. They encouraged us to learn and to be excited about things and do what we wanted to do. We weren't necessarily pushed in any direction.